All right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I confirm that we have quorum. Everyone's here. Councillor Armour, I will ask you to read the land acknowledgement statement.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robertson-Huron Treaty number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions towards real truth and reconciliation in support of the commitment to walk in the path together in respect, peace, and harmony of future generations.
Thanks very much. I have a motion moved by Dion Schumacher, seconded by Dan Armour. Be it resolved that the Licensing Committee meeting agenda dated Wednesday, September 8, 2021 be adopted as printed and circulated. All in favor? And that's carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. The minutes from our last meeting are for information only, and they were in your package. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting to consider appeal applications for short-term rental accommodations under the short-term rental accommodation bylaw. The input received by applicants and staff is important in order for the committee to make sound licensing decisions. The procedure to be followed in this meeting will be as follows. A brief explanation of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or the representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Please note that presentations are limited to 10 minutes. Once the presentations are concluded, the input received may be considered by the committee in closed session prior to making a decision on the appeal. The decision of the committee and brief reasons for the decision will then be presented and voted on in public. License appeal decisions of the committee are final and will be provided to the applicant and made public after the meeting. We'll now deal with the appeal for short-term rental application WF 000061N, 18 Halgren Lane. Johnson.
Good evening, Chair Stone and committee. We're here tonight to discuss 18 Halgren Lane. As noted within the submitted report, staff had multiple communications with the property owner regarding the short-term rental program. Because of the non-compliance, 5 administrative penalties have been issued to the property prior to staff denying the license. The owner received an additional administrative penalty 4 days after filing an appeal to the town. These penalties were mainly based on operating without a license. In addition, the owner failed to provide outstanding items requested at a site inspection on May 27, 2021. However, these documents were submitted at the time of the appeal notice from the owner. Because of the history of non-compliance and the number of administrative penalties issued to the property, staff had decided to deny the license at this time. I'd also like to note that committee and staff did receive 1 letter of support to deny the application this evening. If there are any questions or anything from committee, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. I'll call on the applicant or the representative to make any comments. All right, I see you, Mr. Johnson, and your PowerPoint is coming up here. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to share my position in this matter. In order to provide some context to my presentation today, please allow me to provide a very brief summary of our introduction to Muskoka and the town of Huntsville. Between 2005 and 2011, my 3 children attended camp in the Huntsville area, Wajidowin and Minneowi. It was also during these years that we began to make regular trips with friends and family, staying at camps and then rental properties. Between 2011 and 2018, along with two of our friends, we actually acquired two properties and developed them into cottages in the Port Sydney area. We use these recreationally, and we would rent them when not in use to offset some of our operating costs. In 2015 was the first year where our rental revenue exceeded $30,000, and we registered for HST on both properties. We have been remitting HST on all rental reservations since that time. In 2019, my wife and I, along with our mother-in-law, completed the development of a third cottage property, this time owned solely by our family, something we hoped would become a legacy property and passed down through generations. We also registered for HST on that property at that time. Throughout the past 10 years of offering rental properties within Huntsville, we have remained committed to rent responsibly. To that end, we've adopted different measures to assist in achieving that outcome. Our minimum rental duration in the summer is 7 days and 2 to 3 days in the spring, winter, and fall. This helps attract families and avoid event or party rentals. Also, we have a mandatory rental agreement for every reservation that allows us to outline the house rules and relevant bylaws for the guests, also to validate our primary renters meet the minimum age of 25, and gives us an accurate control of the guest count for the stay. We have also employed different equipment and subscription. And these are technologies that help us monitor the property while still respecting guests' privacy, also monitoring the noise levels at our property and ensuring that we would get early alert to any potential party rentals. We have also been recognized by the rental service providers in successive years for adhering to their best practices, resulting in our designation as Superhost and Premier Partners. In 2020, the town of Huntsville launched a short-term rental licensing program. I personally didn't have any issues with it since the fees were nominal and the municipal accommodation tax would be passed on to the traveler. The town also indicated at that time integration within rental platforms like Airbnb for the collection and remittance of this tax. Then in March of 2020, the first wave of COVID resulted in a lockdown. It must be stated that the COVID pandemic has had significant impact to certain sectors and has had a profound impact specifically on short-term rental properties of one of only many impacted segments. Short-term rental properties are long-term investments, and as such, generally in Ontario, will operate at a loss at the onset. In addition, they require a significant amount of time that is unpaid from the owners in order to manage with the hopes of just breaking even each year. Typically, all of the rental income that is collected is redirected back into the operating expense of that short-term rental property. Through our experience, about 30% of that rental income goes to your managed services. This is things like house cleaning, property grounds maintenance, and laundry. In the case of 18 Hallgren, we have used the same provider since opening. Muskoka Lakes Property Maintenance, operated by Craig Smith, which is 5.1 kilometers from the property, about a 7-minute drive. Also Cleaning by Design, operated by Carrie Wilson and her team. She is located 27 kilometers from the property. Another fifth of the rental income collected goes towards the household operating costs, and the remainder 50% towards finance repayment. At this point, it would be a break-even proposition, but then there are also variable capital costs that come up, and this relates to repair, replacement, and improvements of things like furniture, equipment, or the property itself. Over the past 8 years, we have had 2 years of positive cash flow, but we've had 6 years of negative cash flow. And accordingly, we have had to infuse large amounts of our own savings into these properties in order to sustain the operations. Now, in June of 2020, we moved into stage 2 in Ontario, and rentals did resume, travel limited to certain restrictions regionally. Had this break in the lockdown not occurred, we would have likely been in a position to sell all of our properties in Huntsville last summer. Unfortunately, by October, the restrictions started to tighten again. And by December of 2020, we were moving back into lockdown. At that point in time, it was our best guess that we would need to sell 2 of the properties, but we hope to keep 1 and continue to operate it as a short-term rental. It was at this time that we submitted our application for 18 Hallgren Lane to be licensed as a short-term rental. This is a summary of all of our cancellations, either initiated by us or travelers in 2020 due to the pandemic. I can tell you that the cancellations of short-term rental bookings due to COVID were unprecedented and unlike anything we had seen in all of our years of operation. Furthermore, we found that there was no specific relief programs to support short-term rental programs during this crisis. Moving into 2021, we received 2 communications from the town in early and mid-January, but my understanding is that nothing would proceed related to our license during the active stay-at-home order. In April, that state of emergency was extended. In April and May, my wife and I were actively working on preparing our 2 Port Sydney cottages to be sold, and the ensuing sale was to close in June. In May, my wife and I made a full-time move to a seasonal property within the town of Huntsville. This was to allow me to work on a nearby project, the River Edge Estates, located in the neighboring town of Bracebridge. Also in May, we continued to face strain and uncertainty with our short-term rental property at 18 Hallgren, as reflected by this list of reservations that were either cancellations initiated by me or by our guests. Now, please allow me to focus on the 2-month period between May 27th and July 30th. This seems to be the time frame that led to the denial of our short-term rental license application. In early to mid-May, we received 3 more infractions from the town of Huntsville related to operating a short-term rental property without a license. This caused me to contact the town and determine that they would inspect the property as required for licensing despite the stay-at-home order. They indicated it would need to be vacated during the visit. The corresponding inspection was scheduled and took place on May 27th. And the deficiency did arise about the fire extinguishers, as previously mentioned. I was asked to provide proof of the fire extinguishers being installed by photo once available. The following day, I placed an online order for these extinguishers since the stores were still closed at this time. This is a copy of that online order being placed within 24 hours of the town visiting our property. Furthermore, I received a subsequent notification of pickup was available, and this was completed on June 5th at the Huntsville Canadian Tire location. This is a copy of the online receipt that was generated at the time of pickup. This was 9 days after the town inspection. Then on June 16th, 20 days after the initial inspection, I picked up a voicemail from Ingrid Armstrong inquiring about the status of the extinguisher and the photos. With that reminder, I did visit the property the same day to complete the installation, to take the photos. I composed an email with the attached photos and considered all outstanding requirements for my application fulfilled at that time. For the remainder of June and throughout the month of July, I continued to work on our other property development projects daily while living full-time in Huntsville with my wife. During the month of July, there were 2 possible indicators that may have warned me about an issue with our short-term rental license. The one was an infraction sent by bylaw on July 7th that was mailed to my home. It was added to my mail pile by our young adult children that were residing at our residence. The second was an email that was reported to be sent to me on July 8th from the town. Unfortunately, it did not make it to my inbox, and this email was never viewed. At the beginning of August, we were alerted by one of our children about registered letters being at the home. At this time, all of the mail was collected, and upon receiving the letter of license denial, I made the unfortunate discovery that my email to the town dated June 16th had in fact not been sent and was still in my draft folder. This is a record of that drafted email from June 16th. In summary, I want to acknowledge that the town of Huntsville is fully within their rights to govern and license short-term rental properties within their communities. To date, there are 125 active licenses in the program, which I approximate to be about 20% of the operational short-term rental properties. I've also read that the town plans to strengthen action against the unlicensed properties, but I would plead on behalf of those owners that this licensing implementation comes at a very challenging time for many of them. Hopefully the rollout can proceed, but be approached through that lens. For our part, it was never our intention to have an incomplete or delayed application since submitting our initial application in December. Unfortunately, the timelines for the short-term rental license application were not clearly understood by me as they are not listed anywhere. Also, unfortunately, the communication from the town in regards to our deficiency never came in a format that was registered or required a signature. I will acknowledge that, like many of the residents of Huntsville and many of the businesses of Huntsville, we've experienced very unexpected trauma as a result of COVID. And this has sometimes distracted us from some of our other business responsibilities. I also acknowledge that I was working on multiple projects and commitments throughout most of the summer, and I feel embarrassed in a sense that I had really dropped the ball on this particular requirement. As mentioned earlier, we were not residing at our city home for the entirety of the summer. It resulted in at least one miscommunication from the town. So on these 6 points, I humbly do apologize, and I ask for compassion and leniency from the committee in this matter. As far as our other experiences in Huntsville, we feel that we have been responsible property owners since 2012. We also feel we have positively contributed to the local economy from the builds and developments, the ongoing short-term rental operations, and the people we have been able to hire, as well as supporting tourism in general. If the denial of this application would go through, it would essentially result in the termination of our business dealings within the town of Huntsville. This would be a very unfortunate result for me as well as my family. And through you, Mr. Chair, I hope that that is not the outcome here today. Thank you all sincerely for your time and your consideration.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. If you can stop, perfect. Thank you. I will ask committee if they have any comments or questions from the applicant or staff. Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair Stone. Through you to Mr. Norman, or Mr. Johnson, sorry. I'm just curious, are you continuing to rent your property today, or have you stopped?
Hi, Councillor Armour. Yes, so in terms of the rental commitments at the property, these are commitments that are generally done well in advance of the actual stay. There are some legal consequences and outcomes that would further put more financial burden and stress on this operation if we were to simply cease operation with such short notice.
I have a question for the applicant, actually. So your presentation was mostly about how much money you made or didn't make. You had no mention of the complaints from the neighbors. Can you speak to that point?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So in regards to the complaints for the neighbors, I understand that the letter has been submitted to the town. That has never been provided to me. I can tell you that I have been in touch with the neighbors in the vicinity of 18 Hallgren Lane and made sure that they understand that we have local staff living literally minutes away from the property if a legitimate complaint was ever to arise. After providing them with my contact, the contact of the property maintenance and the manager, we have gone through an entire summer without hearing any complaints related to the real reasons I believe that this licensing has been put in place, which is noise, which is control of occupants, or related to garbage and parking. And so in all of those areas, we have the correct provisions in place. And so I'm not really aware of any legitimate complaints or outstanding items to be resolved on our end.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Schumacher.
Through you, Chair Stone, to the applicant. Is it correct, did you rent out the property during COVID when the stay-at-home orders were in place and you were not able by the province to do so?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. For the most part during COVID, our operations did cease. We had two exceptions to this. One was in the initial stage of a lockdown. There seemed to be a confusion about pre-existing bookings booked prior to October. When the OPP visited the property, they had the same confusion and actually left to go back and verify what the official stance was. This was around January 8th during a stay-at-home order, and then came back with the determination that in fact that was not the case, and that guest was asked to vacate. We made one other exception in late April for a family bubble that had just gotten married, and this was a marriage celebration. Again, the OPP visited and found that they were allowed to stay and complete that stay. There was another infraction issued in May, but this was actually not a rental. It was simply related to our project, a development project, and we had workers at the property. One of them was fined for having open alcohol in a canoe. Didn't realize he couldn't do that. Nobody was issued a fine because of COVID. They had all the paperwork stating that they were there working as essential workers.
All right, if there's no more questions by committee, the committee will now consider the information presented in closed session. I will ask all applicants remaining in this meeting to please mute themselves and turn their video off. So be it resolved that the next portion, moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Dion Schumacher. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public commencing now at 6:22 p.m. for the purpose of considering the following matter pertaining to the following section under the Municipal Act 2001. Section 239(2), a matter in respect of which committee may hold a closed meeting under another act, the short-term rental appeal, application WF 000061N, 18 Halgren Lane. All in favor? And that's carried. We'll go into closed and then we'll come back to open for all those that are watching. All right, I'm just waiting for Councillor Schumacher to show up. All right, Crystal, if you can share your screen so that I can read the motion from there. All right, moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Dion Schumacher. Be it resolved that the committee approve the short-term rental accommodation license for 18 Halgren Lane, Johnson, with the following conditions. The required municipal accommodation tax expenses has been reported and submitted as required through the bylaw 2019-123. The property is registered under the OHMRA agreement as required for future MAT tax submissions. The short-term rental accommodation application shall be finalized to the approval of the municipality. The above to be completed prior to license 2020-113 being revised and issued, and revoking of the license after one strike violation within the next 12 months to be confirmed by staff. All in favor? And I'm opposed. And that's carried. With that, is there any comments by committee? All right, moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Dion Schumacher. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 6:53 p.m. All in favor? And that's carried.